What did your friend do that accidentally turned you on? Drive his car. I've never been into cars, or particularly into car guys, but I looked over at him since we were talking and we were going pretty fast and I dunno. My body wasn't ready to look at my friend driving his fast car, I guess. I was cracking jokes with a coworker, and when she laughed at something I said, she pushed at my chest in that "oh stop it you" kinda way, and hoo boy, I damn near melted right then and there. I have a voice kink. I specifically like very deep voices and certain accents. Playing D&D with my best friends can be very confusing for my vagina. I came back from freshman year college to visit high school and walked into the auditorium, where an incredibly cute girl I was friends with saw me, stopped what she was doing and literally ran up the aisle and jumped into my arms to hug me. Plot twist, married 26 years and have a son. Surprise backwards hug that turned into a full-on embrace. Heart fluttered like crazy. This one girl started tickling me. When I started tickling her back, she started to moan and said she was sensitive there. Awkward drive home. We were hanging out with a bunch of people and moving from one location to the next. She asked to ride with me in my car since I was solo. When she got in my car, she told me to wait and leave the parking lot last. Then she said, let's ditch everyone and just go somewhere else. Just you and Elle. When he whispers into my ear, even though sometimes it's just something silly and not sexy. Formal Friday at school and my friend got real close and straightened my tie for me. I'm still waiting for something to get me that excited again. Held my hand for a few seconds. Just happened a few days ago. She was driving and we held hands for a while. I'm still evaluating why that had such an impact on me. A close friend from uni pulled my ponytail firmly enough to get my attention because I didn't hear him call any. Had to catch my breath after that. We're married now. Guess he got your attention. Was giving a very good friend of mine a hug by and I must have squeezed harder than normal or something, cause she just melted into me and let out the most pleased moan I've heard her make. Stood there for a good 40 seconds holding her up while she composed herself. Her boyfriend was not pleased at all. There are no accidents, Master Oogway. He jumped up, grabbed a fire escape ladder, pulled himself up and climbed all the way to the top. Just oh dear. That's how I learned I have a thing for people climbing/pulling themselves up. One of my girlfriends walked out of my dormitory building in just some short shorts and a plaid shirt, and afterwards she just sat next to me and put her head on my shoulder. But she has a boyfriend. We were in some math class in high school and she was tutoring me mid-class. She was leaning over next to me as I was sat down and she had her hand on my back. She was almost whispering into my ear how to figure out this problem. Something about her voice was so soothing and arousing. It was very sensual and I still think about it often. Nothing ever happened with her. We grew apart after school. Something very similar happened at my job recently though, so it brought me back. I offered him a sip of my drink and he made intense eye contact with me as he slowly put the straw in his mouth and took a nice long sip. He was driving and I was riding shotgun. He had to reverse to parallel park and turned his torso towards me, putting his arm around my seat in order to look back. He did that so confidently and effortlessly that it made me feel a little funny. I told her a joke and she smiled so much, looked at the ground, then gave me a "you're so funny" look. I honestly wanted to date her since then. It's been 3 years and I'm still thinking of her. Multiple things. First, in a party he danced with me and lifted me in the air. I'm not thin and not many people tried this with me. Then on a trip we made with friends, his cousin made a tent using sheets and a bunk bed. We went inside to read manga on his phone. He put his arms around me so we both could see the screen. Before anyone asks, he wasn't into me back then, but now we've been together for nearly 4 years. She dried my motorcycle seat with her sleeve while I was putting my helmet on. A friend of mine and I were texting voraciously while she was on vacation at her dad's house 3 states away. About halfway through her vacation, she sent me topless pic of herself with the caption, "What do you think?" That was 10 years ago, and we've been married for 8. A colleague friend took care of my wounded knee during work. We were alone in the canteen and he was very sweet and caring. Guess I'm not used to that. Ruffled my hair. It wasn't that big a deal, but she was one of my close friends and that just, wow. He and I were watching a movie, when he gave me a hug. While hugging me he gently ran his hands up and down my back. He didn't mean anything sexual with it. I on the other hand have a very sensitive back and was severely turned on by it. The next day he made fun of me for being ticklish. I then admitted to the truth about that. Needless to say he did it again later. We've been dating for over a year now, getting close to 2. I have never been ladylike. So I was play fighting with a friend and he pinned me down and chalked me a little. I still think about it sometimes. When she wore thigh highs with a hoodie, she knows what I'm into. When he flicked between languages whilst talking on the phone with his mother and then asking me to pass him his wallet. I knew people could switch it on and off like that, but I've never seen the flow quite as effortlessly. I can't remember the scenario that led up to it. I think there was something on my back she was helping me get, but she brushed the back of my neck, and that was the day I learned that I have a weak spot. Guy here. Senior year of high school. A guy dares me to give a massage to my girl best friend when she sits down. She sits down, I start giving her a shoulder massage, which I've been told I'm very good at, and she lets out a couple of soft moans, and completely relaxes. I had never really been attracted to her until then. Then I stopped and she slumped back, tilted her head back so I was looking at her upside down and she said don't stop so, that was some feelings I felt since this got a fair amount of views. Nothing ended up coming out of it. She had a boyfriend at the time who was jealous of me for quite some time according to her. We haven't talked much in recent years but we're having dinner and catching up either this weekend or next, depends on if I have to work this weekend or not. I have feelings for her but I'm not sure those feelings are strong enough / worth ruining our 18+ year friendship. We were neighbors, she just kicked out her ex-boyfriend, and we lost power due to an ice storm. The power was restored later, but her heat wasn't working right. She called it in, but the maintenance people were busy with calls to fix heat in other units too. We were hanging out at my place watching movies and basking in my heat, though it was still chilly. So we were sharing a blanket on the couch, snuggled up together, and drinking whiskey. She passed out on the couch, so Elle put on an extra blanket on her and went to my room. About 1 hour later, she walks into my room and just falls into bed next to me, gets under the covers, snuggles up to me, then says I'm cold and passes out. I dunno, maybe I felt wanted and that she came to me for comfort. We didn't hook up or anything. The next morning she woke up, and she made me breakfast, and went back to her apartment to get her heat fixed. I remember a girl classmate friend liking the smell of my deodorant and just grabbing onto my arm and then proceed to walk beside me. What kind of deodorant? Nivea Men Fresh Active Deodorant. Girl was really affectionate and hugged everyone. When she got to hugging me I was really awkward so I admitted that I had never hugged a girl before. She said, and I quote, "It's fine, I'll be your first time." All my friends were laughing at how that sounded and high school me was rock hard. She was my female best friend at the time. We went out to watch A Star Is Born. She rested her head on my right shoulder. I was on cloud 9. I miss her. My back is an erogenous zone for me. Whenever a friend of mine gets too huggy I need to quietly extract myself from them. Had a friend who got a tattoo on the back of her neck. Decided to kneel down in front of me so I could see it. Never been so happy for willpower in my life. Last thing needed was her turning around to find a tent. He still does this. He takes my shopping bags and puts his hand on my back as we cross streets. I'm short and I have a limp and he's so kind and caring about it. I'm terrified of being choked, having people touch my neck etc. after an incident where I was attacked and raped. I thought I would spend my whole life with that being a really serious never ever touch my neck kind of thing. Which it was, for several years. Until my best friend, who is this 67 monstrosity of a human, playfully leaned their hand on my neck. Yup, so it turns out I just needed it to be someone I trust, in a non-sexual setting, to unlock the ability to be turned on via neck being touched. God damn it, brain. So close, but so far. We used to do this thing where she'd kiss my cheek whenever we said bye. She kissed my neck on accident because I moved, think someone distracted me at a party. That's one of my sensitive spots. And yeah, Edit we've been dating happily now for 6 years. Have had several female friends bite me in a playful manner. Turned me on every single time. My friend was looking for an earring she dropped on the ground, and her hair got in the way so she tied it up. I don't even know why, but that turned me on so much. And it's how I discovered I might be bisexual. Best mate's girlfriend and I got along really well. I got along great with her parents. I was sitting on the couch at her parents' house watching motorsport with her dad. She sat next to me, fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. I was okay until I could hear that cute little breathing noise coming from her. My mate broke up with her a month or so later. I was far too dumb to pick up on the many signals from her. She was pulling me like aggressively but playfully. There came this weird comfort I had never felt even from my parents. LOL. It's weird, it isn't a known feeling though, so when it happens for the first time, it scares you. 5. Moved into an apartment where my roommate was one of my best friends who happened to be a girl. Completely platonic relationship for 12 years at that point. 6 months later I'm stoned out of my mind, as per usual, when get home from work late at night and she asked me to lay down in her bed with her because she had woken up from a nightmare. So laid down, on top of the blanket, and she fell asleep. I had intended to get up and go into my own room and watch cartoons with the rest of my high, but Elle ended up getting comfy and fell asleep. The next morning she woke me up by lightly scratching my back, but little did she know that nails on my back are an instant turn on. Never had any feelings for each other. Never did anything even remotely physical. Nothing. Just boom, instant would. Jokingly told her to cut it out or it's gonna get awkward, and she didn't know what I meant at first until I rolled over and she saw the tent in my pants. We discussed the idea of us being together or even just casual sex between friends, and 1 year later I wifed her. No rejects. Not a single letter. Married my best friend because she accidentally made me horny. I was having a drink with an old friend a long time ago. At a point after a brief pause she just looked at me, smiled and said, "You're very handsome, you know." It got a little quiet, awkward, and we carried on drinking and chatting, and soon it was like nothing had happened. But from that moment on I never failed to notice the striking blue of her eyes, and my feelings became slightly complicated and conflicted. It didn't last, of course. Just bizarre how a compliment can change a perception, especially for us men who receive so few. We barely speak anymore. We're both married and she has a son. Of course I love my wife with all I have and all am. But there's always that memory. I've never forgotten it and imagine I never will. Was talking with a coworker and her friend walked behind her and tugged her hair as a joke. Her reaction was a quick lip bite and eyes rolled up. It happened so fast but I had to walk away for a moment. She asked me to touch her thigh. She was very proud of them after working out. Little did she know I really like thighs. We're engaged now. I was the friend. She had hosted a party with our friends. We had been on the same beer pong team for a bit and I had been jokingly giving her a hard time about missing some shots, to which she responded by saying that she'll slap me, an inside joke. It would not have been hard. I stared at her, and she raised her hand to so, and while maintaining my gaze, I quickly grabbed her by the wrist and held on for a second before letting go. She quite literally said that turned me on and then asked if I heard what she said. I said yeah and continued playing. My crush felt my hoodie because it was soft. I don't know, it felt weird and turned me on. God, I'm so lonely. Not really a friend, but my first boyfriend when I was still finding out how attraction works. Pulled the collar of his shirt and leaned his head to the other side because he wanted to scratch his neck. I don't know, I probably have some fetish for collar bones and necks. Out. Sat beside each other. She lied her head down onto my lap. I went into panic mode and promptly jumped in my seat, making her sit back up. I was on a band trip in grade 10/11 and one of the female bassoon players I was friends with gave me a literal hand massage. It was damn nice and got me sprung, LOL. She looked at me. We were sitting on her couch watching Thor Ragnarok. Finished our Chinese food. She got a pint of Ben & Jerry's out of her freezer and she sat sideways half on my lap and took turns taking a bite and feeding me a bite. It was oddly intimate, but she'd made it clear she was convinced if we started to date we'd end up married, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. 6 months later we were dating. 6 months after that we were married, coming up on our 2-year anniversary. Gave me a slow back hug out of nowhere. We were drinking and her hands slowly circled my waist and leaned in. She was a bit tipsy and did that cause she was feeling sleepy. I froze and hoped that she doesn't hear how fast my heart was beating. I still get flashbacks whenever we hang out and I try to avert my eyes. I was making coffee in my AeroPress for us and pressing slowly on the top of it like you're supposed to, when she shouldered me over a little and leaned on my hand to push it down faster. It was cute as F and I'll never forget it. Writing their name on my hand/arm. Extra points if they add a little heart. When I worked in a restaurant, the head chef was the type who was very particular. His way was always right and he was bossy, but he was also super nice/funny, do it balanced out. He essentially just had a very dominant personality. I would call the garlic toast garlic bread because I didn't see much of a difference, and while we were rushing that's the name that would come out of my mouth. It was kind of our thing to bicker back or forth. We had fun and laughed with it and it never had any actual tension. But one day I yell for some garlic bread. He's holding it in his tongs and is about to give it to me when he says, "Call foot garlic toast." I said, "Okay, I will." When he goes, "No, say it now. Call it garlic toast. I want to hear you say it." So I'll start giggling and say, "Okay, chief," to where he once again in a very dominant way says, "No, say it." Once I cracked and laughed, then said it. He smiled and good girl y'all. The sub in me has never been happier. When she put her hands on the back of her neck while leaning on the table and her eyes never left yours while listening to you. Instant turn on. In high school, a girl I hung out with changed clothes in front of me on the basis that, well, you've seen me in a bikini so whatever, and I was like, why you PP? We were sleeping in the same bed after a night out at our friend's flat and she told me to spoon with her because she was cold. Have this friend of mine. One day at home while we were drinking with some other friends, she started singing. At that moment I looked at her and didn't just see my friend, I saw a very attractive young woman. I sometimes still see that moment when I look at her and shake the thought away. Decide to randomly put their legs on your lap to sleep while in a car. We went for a walk, and she told me she was tired and demanded a piggy back home. And she rested her chin on my shoulder, and there was just something about having her gently breathe on my neck as well as having a conversation with her whispering into my ear. We were in a theater with a group of friends, and while watching the movie, she would put her head on my shoulder and talk to me about how people come to theaters to kiss. LOL. I got the butterflies in my stomach but never acted on it. It was later on when I realized how dumb I was for missing my chance. Around 2002-ish I was playing Counter-Strike on my computer, when suddenly my next door neighbor girl just came into my room and sat on my lap. While hugging and breathing down my neck, I'm sure she could feel my growing enthusiasm. After a lot of deaths I finally decided to quit the game and just hug back. After a while I started to wonder if she had fell asleep or something. Turns out she just had a bad day and all she needed was a hug. But that breathing down my neck. Yes. I am a girl and I have a boy best friend. After 4 years of friendship he requested we should hug. The first time we hugged it kind of turned me on. I later realized we were also spooning when a small girl was the big spoon. A girl I became friends with on a school trip in high school fell asleep on my shoulders on the ride back. I'm 28 and I'm still coasting on that memory. The last guy I had a crush on, he was my boss. He was walking and folding his sleeves the same time and I was looking at him because it was such a simple thing, but damn, I couldn't work the entire day. I had to call a friend to calm down. LOL. Great. Now the crush has resurrected. We were both drunk at a friend's house party, and I playfully pulled her hair to get her attention. She gasped, and then gave a happy little moan. What made it hotter was the way she gripped the seat of her chair with both hands, and encouraged me to do it again, and so I ended up playing with her hair all night. I still think about her gorgeous bliss-filled face, though sadly we never took it any further. Playfully choked me on a school trip at 2 a.m. with a couple of our friends asleep in the bed next to us. My high school crush was sitting on a table during class and pulled me close to her and wrapped her legs around my waist to not let me leave. She was in cross country, so her legs had some decent power on them. Right after, she grabbed my arm and gently bit my forearm. Little did I know, she awakened 2 new things in me. She sat on my lap, saying hey there Delilah, and every time she was with her friends and I rolled up they all stood there in silence and watched us talk. Then I got cancer, never returned to 6th form and get into uni 4 years later. The same university she just enrolled in to do her master's. We were both working at a YMCA summer camp, running around in swimsuits because all of the kids brought squirt guns to camp for water gun battle day. I was wearing typical guy board shorts, she was wearing a standard one-piece. After the big water gun battle, she went into my backpack and stole my normal shirt and shorts and put them on, over top of her swimsuit, in front of me. We're married now, with a kid. Girl sitting in front of me in high school English class was flirty and gorgeous and had a line of guys who would do practically anything she asked just to get her attention. I was one of those idiots. She broke her pencil one day in class, turned around and gazed at me, asked me ever so sweetly to go sharpen her pencil for her. Girl behind me I'd known since 3rd grade grabbed my collar and held me in my seat, looked at the girl in front of me and told her to go sharpen her own damn pencil. She then gently patted me on the back and went right back to doing her work. I have never been so hard in my life. My friend was once telling me about ear kissing, with tongue and everything. I laughed and said that sounded gross and uncomfortable. She did it to me and oh my god. Made me watch Teen Titans with them, started watching the first episode as friends. We were dating by the time we finished the last one. This was 5 years back in high school. A female friend and I were put in a group together for a science project. We met up after school at her place, because no one was home and she didn't want to drive over to my place. As was sitting on my laptop and reading, she scratched my forearm with her nails to get my attention. Man. Her look in her eyes and the scratches. I still remember that. My female friend in school 10 years ago, who was in my clique, decided to adjust her bra in front of me, cupped her boobs and adjusted them. I was like, oh my god. Done, look at her. The cute lesbian, or so I was told by a friend, who sat across from me in biology lab, brushed my leg with her foot. I found it so hot that Elle decided to ask her out, figuring she was bi. Turns out that she was into me too and we've been married for a few years now. Funny thing is that she didn't even brush my leg on purpose. She was just stretching. Been friends with this woman for about 4 years. She was putting on a coat with a hood. She pulled the hood up to over her head, then poked her face out and I got turned on. She was so cute with the style of the way she done it. Even now when I talk to her and she gives a certain look, I get turned on from that. Not a friend per se, but a random stranger. I was checking out at a drugstore. I gave my phone number for the rewards system and immediately we started chatting about where we were from. Turns out we grew up about 40 miles or so from each other and discussed what it's like being so far from home. When she handed me my change back, we held hands for a few seconds too long, and that is probably the closest thing to intimacy I've felt in a very, very long time. Not very subtle, but she spontaneously pulled her pants down to tan her legs while we were chilling outside. When she suggested doing it, I was like, oh sure, assuming she had shorts on underneath. Nope. Victoria's Secret panties. I laughed and said, dude, we're outside, but in truth, God, I was turned the hell on. She wasn't the brightest friend, but that's what made hanging out with her so fun. I miss pre-COVID times. Had a really good friend who was a girl throughout high school. Never thought she was particularly attractive, but as part of a joke, she did this satirical lip bite and wink, and well, let's just say I'll still remember it vividly. A good childhood friend of mine is a hugger. I'm not. I'm from a culture where physical contact isn't a thing. So when we meet each other for the first time since 5th grade a decade later, and she wraps herself around me like an octopus, it was a little overwhelming. It's still one of my most treasured memories, not that I'll ever tell her about it. He exists. I was sitting shotgun, and he was messing with me in the chair behind me. Stuff like grabbing my shoulders, pinning me to the seat by shortening the seat belt, stroking my hair. I was beet red, but I didn't tell him to stop. We're dating now. Smiley face. He's the sweetest person I've ever dated. I feel really lucky. A few years ago, me and a friend were goofing around, making flower crowns on a grassy knoll. She decides to roll down said knoll, and as she does, her shirt rides up and I can see the sun reflecting off that little line of hair that goes down from the belly button. I swear time stopped and all of my blood vessels woke up at once. The sun was shining brighter, the flowers smelled sweeter. It was as if I briefly stepped into a more perfect pocket dimension. It was then I knew I definitely was not straight. I was off from college for about a week. I came back and a friend of mine who I hung out with every day ran up and hugged me, but as she hugged me she jumped and wrapped her legs around me and we were just looking at each other. Should have just went for it, but alas, I only realized after the fact months later. If I could go back in time I'd punch myself in the balls. Went to the movies and she put her head on my shoulder. Was smiling uncontrollably but I don't think she noticed. She said yes the same night. Been together ever since.